Hi everybody, my name is Stephanie. Welcome to my channel. Today, Shelby and I are making a 3D train cake inspired by the game Colt Express. I already posted a picture of this cake on my social media pages and everyone overwhelmingly loved the popcorn smoke. This cake also lights up, which makes it even more spectacular. So in this video, I'm going to take you through every detail of the making of the black locomotive in the front. And then I'm going to give you just a few highlights from the making of the train car in the back. And then at the end, we're going to put it all together. Before we get started, will you please go down and hit the subscribe button for me? We're trying to get up to 5,000 subscribers and we're halfway there, which is pretty exciting. All right, let's get started. Okay, we've already baked our chocolate cakes. This one is a 10-inch square that I've cut in half and torted. We're giving it a thin layer of chocolate ganache and then a layer of peanut butter buttercream frosting. After we've got these two layers stacked, I need to add some supports. These are plastic straws that I've pre-measured and cut. Next, I'm cutting off the top of a 5-inch square and I torted it as well. I actually need two 5-inch squares for this part. Shelby loves this cake because it tastes like a Reese's peanut butter cup. I add the board, and then Shelby is going to layer up more cake, ganache, and peanut butter buttercream frosting. For the front of the cake, I'm cutting another 5-inch square cake in half diagonally, and then I place it onto my board and I fill it with more ganache and peanut butter buttercream frosting, and then I cut away some of the cake on the sides. I take a little bit off the top too, and I completely cover it in buttercream frosting. Okay, onto the cylinder part of the train. Shelby is using a round circle cutter to cut out circles of cake. She's filling them with chocolate ganache, and she continues cutting circles and stacking them until she has a cylinder shape. I put it into the refrigerator to chill, and now I'm moving it over onto the cake. I gave it a layer of buttercream frosting, but then I decided it was too big, so I got out a smaller circle cutter and I trimmed some of the cake off. Cake baking for me is all about trial and error, and I just figure it out as I go along. Okay, I've got it back into place and I recovered it in buttercream frosting, and I smoothed out the round edges with my flexible plastic smoother and my straight edges with a metal icing comb. For extra sharp edges, I dip my offset spatula into a cup of hot water. I dry it off with a paper towel, and then I use a spatula to get the extra smooth surface. Alright, onto the fondant. I bought this fondant pre-colored. It's called Satin Ice. My surface is dusted with cornstarch, and I roll out my fondant to about 1/4 inch. I drape it over my rolling pin and then I place it onto my cake. I'm smoothing it out the best that I can, and then I cut away the excess around the bottom edges. I use my fondant smoother to make it nice and smooth. And then I cover the back of the cake and I cut and smooth it out in the same way. The top of the train has a roof that hangs over the edge a little bit, so I'm using my black fondant again, but this time I've mixed in a little bit of Tylose powder into it. And then I move it over onto the top of the cake. Here I'm just cutting out a circle of fondant and attaching it to the front. A lot of these decorations were made by just cutting out squares or rectangles. This is the door, and after I cut it out, I'm giving it a wooden texture by lightly running my strip cutter over the top of it. And then I'm attaching that to the cake too. On the front of the train, there's a metal fender type thing. I looked it up, and the fancy name for it is a pilot, and it's there to push objects off the track. To create the pilot, I'm cutting out strips of fondant just like this, and then I let them dry for a couple of hours so they would keep their shape. Once they were dry, I attached them to the cake with edible glue. Next up are the wheels. I'm using the same black fondant, but again, since I want these to dry out, I've mixed in a little Tylose powder. I use my circle cutter to cut out a bunch of small circles. I'm actually cutting out double the amount that I will need. And then I let these dry out for a couple hours too. Next, I'm cutting out the center of half the circles, just like I'm doing here. And then next, I'm hand painting the spokes. The paint that I'm using is silver highlighter dust mixed with a tiny drop of vodka. Now I'm brushing the outer edges of my wheels with edible glue, and I'm placing the rings that I just made right on top of it. Next, I need to get my locomotive onto the board. I've already covered my board in a light tan colored fondant. I spooned some candy melts onto the board, and I carefully move my cake over into place. To keep it extra secure, I'm pushing a sharpened wooden dowel into the cake, and then I push down with another dowel to make sure my sharpened dowel is going all the way into my board. Next up, I'm putting my wheels into place. You'll have to use an edible glue like piping gel or gum glue to hold these into place since they're already dry. The top of the train has these decorations that look like 2 pipes and 1 chimney. So to make these, I'm rolling out a log of fondant and I'm cutting out a short one and a tall one, and they're just gonna stand up just like this. The chimney starts in the same way with a log of fondant, and then I hand model the top of it. I'm just starting with a ball shape and then I'm pinching around the middle to shape it. Using my ball tool, I press a hole down into the top. Next, I'm brushing a skewer with edible glue and I push the pieces into place. To add a little more detail, I'm adding a strip of fondant to my pieces. All trains need a light, so here I'm forming a cube of fondant and then I press a hole in the center to hold the light. The light is a small LED light called a balloon light. I got it on Amazon. They're fairly inexpensive and last for a few days. They're brightest on the first day and then slowly start dimming, so I wouldn't put this on until the very last minute. I'm attaching the chimneys and the light to the cake. After I've got the light on, I'm hand painting the strips of fondant on my chimney. The paint is called Metallic Gold and it's 100% edible and it's made by Rainbow Dust. Okay, a bunch of details are coming up here. Now I'm dusting some brown food color powder onto the door to make it look more realistic. And here I'm adding more strips of fondant and painting those in gold too. The front needs some decoration too, so I used my clay extruder to make this thin log of fondant, and I also painted that gold. This is when I had a great idea to use popcorn as the smoke. To do it, I had to remove the chimney and take out the skewer, and use a 6-gauge armature wire that I covered in foil tape instead. I pushed the wire down into the cake and I got it into place, and then we will come back to this popcorn part in a minute. Next, I'm adding some details to the wheels. These are some fondant circles and some gold dragées. Sometimes I over-decorate cakes. I could have just stopped here, but instead I continued with more wheel details. I have so much fun making these cakes that sometimes I just keep on going. It's time for our favorite part, adding the popcorn smoke. It was so easy. All we did was dip pieces of popcorn into some white chocolate candy melts, and then we stuck them to the foil-covered wire. We were so happy about how the popcorn turned out that we had to take a break to celebrate. Okay, we're all finished with the locomotive, and now I'm going to show you just some highlights from the making of the train car. We're just going to speed through this part. It's just me layering up some ganache and then our peanut butter buttercream frosting. And I'm using 10-inch cakes again that I've cut in half and torted. I'm giving it some straws for support and another board. And then I'm just going to stack up 2 more layers of cake. I completely covered it in buttercream frosting, and actually I made another batch and I used just white buttercream frosting, and then I smoothed it out to make it nice and square. Next, I'm covering it with some light brown fondant, and then I'm trimming away the excess fondant here very carefully. This is a 6-wheel pastry cutter that I'm using just to make some wooden planks. And then I'm adding my wheels. And then I'm airbrushing it right along the little edges to make it look more like wood. And here I'm unrolling a piece of brown fondant. It's just a strip of fondant I made with a strip cutter. And these are the windows. I'm attaching those with some edible glue. And I cannot forget about the railroad track. These are just more strips of fondant in gray and brown. Here I'm using a lollipop stick to make the part of the train that connects to the train car, and I'm covering that with a piece of fondant. Okay, we're getting closer to finishing finally. Shelby is making chocolate cactuses and a chocolate ladder by melting candy melts. She placed them into a squeeze bottle and then she's filling up the molds. And then she's giving them a good shake to get out any air bubbles. Once they're completely cold, they just pop right out. Voila! Let's finish it. Here we are adding our chocolate pieces. Since our train is based on the game Colt Express, we added some details from the game, like the loot. And we cannot forget the character from the game, Cheyenne. Cheyenne is a pickpocket, so you better steer clear of her. Our train cake is complete. Thank you so much for watching our video. I hope you learned how to make your own 3D train cake. If you learned anything at all, will you please go down and hit the like button or share this video with your friends? Also, if you're on social media, please go check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. All right, I'll see you guys next time. Bye.